again, Lando Norris has proved the naysayers wrong. He's won his second Grand Prix of the season, and I still have a full head of hair. Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Tom Downey, and here today we're going to discuss the 2024 Dutch Grand Prix. And joining me is Grid Talk co-host and longtime boo, Tom Horrocks.
Hello, this is not going to be confusing for the audience at all with two Toms.
No, it's definitely not, is it? Besides, if we get lost, we can always use the sat nav called Tom Tom. I bet we've never heard that one before. Before we get into this episode, though, we must thank our sponsor, BetOnline. So BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. For the preseason NFL to college kickoff, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-takes-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use promo code BLEAV and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. Also, very quickly, as usual, little plug, please follow us on social media at GridTalkUK. And also, if you're feeling extra generous, please do consider supporting on Patreon for exclusive access and behind-the-scenes content. So, Tom, 2024 is throwing up another winner. I was going to say another surprise winner, but after today, once Lando got the lead, I don't really think he was a surprise winner. So, this is the second time we're sort of having this chat this season. He got his debut win in Miami earlier this year. Some argued a bit of fortune with the safety car, but this time round, I don't think you can take anything away from this, even after his poor start, which we'll get into in a bit. It's his second win of the season, and you sound like Jonathan Ross then. It's his second win of the season, and he finished almost a pit stop ahead of Max Verstappen by the end. I mean, what more can we say?
Well, yeah, there's definitely no element at all of doubt in this one. It was 23 seconds, the fastest lap on the last lap as well. I know he spent the last 3 laps of the race that had the foresight to just charge up the battery, get it nice and hot, and then just empty the thing on the final lap to take fastest lap by a couple of hundredths from Lewis Hamilton, who set that on much younger, softer tyres as well. So he had pace I wouldn't say pace in hand, but he definitely had pace at his disposal to deploy. And the biggest win margin of the season, which when you think about how dominant Red Bull were at the start of the season, that's pretty intense. And I think I will caveat it by saying that this is Zandvoort where overtaking is quite difficult. The Red Bull was a very difficult car today. I'm not saying there was like a bottleneck behind him or anything like that, but as well, once Leclerc got into third place as well, Piastri couldn't show his pace, so there was no threat from Verstappen. He knew he didn't have the pace of Norris, so he was just kind of looking after his car. So I don't think McLaren are 22 seconds a race ahead of Red Bull, put it that way, but. It certainly was a dominant performance and a much needed performance. And I said to my wife on lap 10, I think it was like, Lando's going to win this one easily. She's like, oh, we're so confident because she's a massive Max Verstappen fan. And I was like, no, actually, I am really confident he's going to win this by a country mile. The only thing that's going to stop him is safety cars and red flags. And there wasn't any of those. There wasn't even a yellow flag. So yeah, it was a pretty straightforward win in the end, and not a barnstorming race by any stretch of the imagination. But I think with Zandvoort, you really need rain to make it exciting in that sense. But yeah, happy for the result, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do agree with what you said there. Zandvoort definitely benefit from some rain to make it that bit more exciting, as we saw last year, for example, when the cars went bowling, sort of Valtteri Bottas style down into turn one. But Max Verstappen finished P2, 23 seconds behind the lead, like you said. That is a pit stop behind. Now that is quite something in itself, but I mean, I don't think Max is going to be too worried today because he still has a 70-point lead. I think we were discussing just before the race, before the show started, over Lando Norris. Now there are 9 races left, I believe, after this race. So we have 9 races still to come. Do you think that this sort of World Drivers' Championship battle is really on the season, or do you think it's still? Do you think there's still perhaps a bit too much of a deficit to make up for Lando to really sort of have a proper swing at Max?
I think that all depends on circumstances. We've got 9 races left, and if Lando Norris were to win every single race and get the fastest lap, not taking sprints into account whatsoever, then and Verstappen comes home second, he will win the championship. So mathematically, he's definitely in it, even with Max Verstappen following him home in every race. But I don't think that's going to be the case. That being said, McLaren are looking like they now have the best car across a race distance. I know from somebody who I know who will to come on the car between now and the end of the season, which would be very interesting if that puts more performance on this car. And also, there are a couple of circuits coming up that Red Bull are particularly nervous about, and Red Bull have got McLaren have a car that seems to be very placid across all types of circuit. It's it does seem to be pretty solid no matter what the circuit is. So I think we're looking decent for. I'm not saying that the championship is on for Lando Norris, but if he can sort these starts out, and if he can, and if we have a little bit of luck from a championship perspective of Verstappen running into a couple more little issues here and there, I think we might have a chance of going into Abu Dhabi with the championship not settled. Now that might well be that Verstappen has a 25-point lead. So it would take something incredible to win. But if we went into the last race just with something like something that might happen that could decide the championship, it probably won't, and it'll probably still be a Max Verstappen championship. But that would be amazing. I would take that in a heartbeat, just being 24 points behind at the last race. But Piastri, I know he was locked up behind Leclerc, but he's showing similar pace to Lando Norris and showed today that his time management is getting better. So he could potentially come in with a fight as well. He's not a million miles behind Lando Norris either. So I don't think the fight for second is over. I mean, it's not just a fight between Verstappen and Norris to the end because Piastri's got the same car. So he's shown that he can match Lando. So I think there's still lots to fight for.
No, definitely. And you made a good point there about Piastri. He's definitely in that fight, like you said. He's definitely sort of looking at sort of P2 in the constructors if he can. He still has a deficit to make up, I believe, to Leclerc as well. And his tire management, you made a very good point. It is getting there. Let's not forget this is only his second year of Formula One, and that will come in time because obviously these cars are very, very different to Formula 2 cars that he drove previously. But I have no doubt that we'll see Piastri certainly in a championship battle in the future, and I'd like to see Lando in it as well. And then that will pose a question for McLaren, who do they back to win? But if you want to win, one of the things you have to do, and I hate to keep dragging this up, is you have to get your race starts right. Now, I know Lando won. I know he won by 23 seconds, but this is the 6th time that he started on pole position across sprints and Grand Prix that he has then lost out. And we talked about it before the start of the show that, it was only a short run to turn one. Now, I know everybody on the odd number side of the grid seemed to get a worse start. So there may have been some sort of inherent difference there. But, Tom, this is the 6th time now we've seen Lando just bogged down and not get a good second phase of a launch, and ultimately sort of just the start once again is proving to be his it was almost his undoing. Thankfully, he showed he has the pace and then some today to actually sort of make up the difference. But do you think this is going to potentially become an issue for Lando in the future, or do you think it's something that can sort of be ironed out?
Well, obviously it is an issue because it is happening. I do think that on this occasion, I don't think he'll lose too much sleep over it because of what you said about the odd numbered starting positions. Looking back through the grid, I don't think anybody got on that side of the grid came out of the first corner in the position they started, and it was all negative. You looked at the graphic after turn 3, and it was just green arrow, red arrow, green arrow, red arrow, green arrow, red arrow. Everybody lost positions down there. It's only when you get down to the very bottom where everyone's all clumping together where it got a little bit confusing. But I think this one, you look at his start compared to the people on his side of the grid. His teammate was exactly the same, and it was going back through the grid as well. Everyone on that side got a very similar start. It will concern him, but I think what it comes down to as well is McLaren don't have as strong a starting mechanism as other cars. Certainly Red Bull are incredibly quick on the start line, and Verstappen particularly is very quick. Perez notoriously always bad at starts, but the Red Bull itself is a very fast launching car. Again, I'm not saying that Lando is blameless because we've seen his teammate pass him in the same car from second position. So there's clearly an issue in there with him. I don't know. I think this will go a long way to helping him with the confidence side of things, given that he was able to just drive past Verstappen and win the race. But it will cause problems. He does need to understand what the problem is. And if the problem is just, Red Bull are just better starters than us, then that's something that McLaren have to work on. And Lando can go into a race. He can set up his car for the race and be, I just need to make sure that I've got the quickest car in the race, and I might lose positions off the start. What he can't do is do what happened in Belgium, where he let that go to his head. And when he's got Max Verstappen starting way back in the pack, him starting on the front row, losing positions, and ending up behind Verstappen at the end of the race because he's panicked too much, put it off track. So I think he just needs to keep his head together, understand what the problem is, and accept the problem. Try and do something about it if he can. If he can't, he just needs to accept it and move on and just be what he is, which is an incredibly fast racing driver who can manage tyres incredibly well. Just because, name me one driver who's won a race at the start. The only thing you could say is Max Verstappen won the Belgian Grand Prix in 2021 at the start, qualifying, because the race never happened. But no one's ever won a race at the start. But it's what you do in the race that matters. So I'm not concerned in that sense with this one, but there definitely is cause for concern there, and he just needs to get on top of it and understand it.
Yeah, and it's it's something that will sort of hopefully sort of come in time, but he has been in the sport since 2019. So, we saw it with Hamilton in 2016, where he had some really, really poor race starts that year. Could argue ultimately cost him a championship. So, I just hope we don't have to have the same conversation sort of, at the end of this year.
It wasn't just that cost him the championship that year.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And Lando has shown that he does do good starts in the past. I think it's more of this generation of car thing with this type of car, the way the McLaren is. It's caused a problem. It's never been a problem in the past. It might be mental because now he's up the front, whereas before he's looking at cars around him. But no, I agree. Sorry, I interrupted you. I'll let you carry it.
That's right. And also, it could have been the past we didn't notice it before because the car wasn't at the front. So, it's definitely sort of one to sort of keep an eye on, certainly if you are a McLaren fan. But Sergio Perez, he actually qualified in the top 10 on merit for once. Woo. I should expect in a Red Bull. He finished the race in P6. Now, he started P5, I believe, because he started on the quote-unquote dirty side of the grids, like Piastri and like Lando in front of him. Got a bit of a poor start. You could hear all those cars sort of wheel spinning. So, bear in mind everything I just said about Lando, you can sort of apply it here to Perez. Slightly poor start, lost out. Like I said, he was starting from the odd sides of the grid. He was ahead of both the Mercs. He had a 4.5 second pit stop when he came in for his first stop. So that certainly didn't help anything. Ultimately, he got past because he was sort of out of sync with everybody. But he held his own in as far as he finished P6. And given that Red Bull seemed to have inherent sort of issues today, do you think sort of P6, P5 was the best that he could have expected, or the best Red Bull could have expected for him?
I think he'll be disappointed in finishing P6 from starting P5. Yes, there were two crucial things in his race, his start and his pit stop, that definitely contributed to him losing positions. But if it hadn't been for the team that we're probably going to talk about next, Mercedes, and their bizarre, whether it be strategy or whether it be forced into it due to tire issues or whatever, but if it hadn't been for the Mercedes doing odd things, he would have been a distant 8th place at the back of that run. And, Max is proving that car is still the second best car on the grid. And he would have been behind all of those cars. And everybody everybody outside the top 8 was lapped today. That just shows how strong the pace is with those top 4 teams. It's definitely a top 4 team fight now. They are just stretching their legs and pulling away. But it's still it's better. And let's be honest, right? So McLaren have closed in on Red Bull again in the Constructors' Championship, but Sergio Perez has gone and scored 8 points today. How bad would it be had he not scored those 8 points? All of a sudden, you're looking at a 22 point gap, and that all of a sudden is one race weekend and a 1-2, and you've lost the lead in the championship. So he's starting to stem the flow, and he needs to be. That is the minimum. That is the absolute minimum that he needs to do. So you know me, I've been very critical of Sergio Perez over the years. Ironically, the last 4 races, I've not been that critical of him. I think he's been doing a better job and been screwed by Red Bull a little bit on strategy. And again, today, the pit stop really out of his control. His pace still isn't up there, but it's never going to be up there. So I think this is what he needs to do, the absolute minimum. If he can do this in Monza, have a better uptick in form for the next following races after that, and God forbid, win a race. I'm not sure that's going to happen ever, as I famously said. But if he can just keep doing this and a bit more, then he will keep his drive till the end of the season because he's stemming the flow. What he needs to be is beating Oscar Piastri. That is the difference between, Max and Lando will fight it out race by race between now and the end of the season. That's going to happen. He needs to be beating Piastri. And Piastri is by no means a second driver. So he is going to be hard to beat because he is a 22 point gap. And that all of a sudden is one race weekend and a 1-2, and you've lost the lead in the championship. So he's starting to
I do apologize. We appear to have lost Tom. So we shall await for him to come back. And if and when he's back, we will continue the discussion around Perez's slight upturn in performance. What I do want to sort of go ahead and sort of mention now, I'll mention 2 points. Apologies to everybody listening and to people watching because this is slightly unorthodox. As we only have 2 of us, and one of us has just disconnected. So, just looking away from the results of the weekend for a moment and looking ahead to some of the news that we have on, it was mentioned, I believe, briefly in the preview that Jack Doohan has signed for Alpine for 2025, which is a very, very good sort of hoop for Alpine, if you will. It's the first time that Alpine has actually promoted a academy driver, and it's good to see Alpine actually promoting one of their own, and bearing in mind that the driver that's being replaced, Esteban Ocon, didn't make it out of Q1 and only finished P15, I believe, today. Whereas his teammate Pierre Gasly managed to finish P9 to pick up 2 points. And speaking of people making a miraculous comeback, I'm very pleased to say that Tom has resolved his tech issues and he's back with us. Tom, I was just saying that Alpine has signed Jack Doohan for next season. I think we talked about that in the preview show. I should know I hosted it, but I can't remember because I've slept since then. And then I was also saying that Ocon had a bit of a lonely race. He finished P15, and Gasly picked up some good points for the team in turmoil in P9. Have you got anything you'd like to add about Alpine, or are they sort of just dead in the water? Okay, moving on. Tom, one final piece of potential news from this weekend is Kimi Antonelli appears to have been all but confirmed for Mercedes in 2025. Toto Wolff sort of seemed to let slip that there is potentially that he is almost certainly going to be in that seat next season. Now, it's not sort of written confirmed that he's going to be there. However, he Toto certainly seemed to give more than a hint that Kimi Antonelli will be in that seat. Tom, do you think this would be a good move for Mercedes to put Kimi Antonelli back in that seat? Or do you think he would be better off suited being in, say, Williams or something for a year? Now, I know Williams isn't an option, but do you think he'd be better having, say, another year in F2, or do you think he might as well go straight into that Mercedes seat?
Just checking, are you receiving me? Because I keep dropping out at my end. Yes, fantastic. Let's hope I can stay. Yes, say my internet is unstable. Thank you for that, Zoom. Right. So, question: Antonelli to Mercedes. I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, he's shown much potential as anyone has shown as a rookie since Lewis Hamilton, and he came straight into a winning car. And how did that turn out? It's going to be insane. Coming into a potentially winning car in your debut season is going to be hard work for him, a lot of pressure. If he can adapt to that, he's got the weight of a nation on his shoulders. So Italy have been waiting; they haven't had a driver capable of winning a race on a regular basis for a long time. I'm trying to think when the last time they had a regular race winner would be. Probably it could even be going back as far as Riccardo Patrese. I mean, Fisichella obviously won a couple of races. I think Trulli may have won a race, but we're talking regular. So there's going to be the weight of a nation there. It's brave. It's very brave from Mercedes. But the key thing in the Toto Wolff's letting it slip moment that you mentioned, I'm a little concerned for George Russell as well, because he said, "Oh, we're going to have we know our drivers 2025." That kind of indicates it's definitely going to be Antonelli. And then he said, "We want to give George." He said, "We want to give George and Kimi the best chance for 2026." And I didn't realize at that time George Russell's contract is up at the end of 2025. If they're looking to try and bring in Max Verstappen, that is, I fear for him. I really do think there's a chance that George Russell could lose this golden opportunity here. He's been sitting in that seat for 3 years, waiting for them to get good, and then they might suddenly get good, and then he might be out on his ear again. So, if Antonelli shows that he's got a higher ceiling than Russell, then that could well be the case if they're able to bring in Verstappen, as a lot of people think they will be. But Antonelli, I think if he's as good as people think he is, then he's in exactly the right place. I think he'll be given time at Mercedes, but he will be in the spotlight. He just needs to be nurtured and make sure that if he does make mistakes, that they're dealt with in the correct way. So it's going to be exciting. I love it when you get a rookie in a fast car. I mean, with Piastri, it's proven how much he can light a fire underneath people, and you don't need 3 seasons in a Williams to prove that you can win races. Just think how many races George Russell could have won if he'd have gone in after that first year. It's a missed opportunity there. Sorry, Bottas, but it's a missed opportunity. That was for George Russell and for Mercedes. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I think it'll be great for the sport.
Yeah, it would definitely be good for the sport. I still maintain that I think he should have another year in F2, because he's taken a little while to sort of make that step up from sort of sort of Becker and the sort of regional formulas he was in, compared to the sort of physicality and the sort of knowledge, etc., that a Formula 2 car requires. To go from that to up to F1 is something else. Just to add to what we've just said, I have just done a quick bit of research, aka Googling, whilst you're talking. Mercedes is giving Antonelli his F1 debut in FP1 in Monza next weekend, as it's actually Antonelli's 18th birthday today. So maybe he's now old enough for a super license. And perhaps this could have been why Mercedes was waiting to delay announcing it. I don't know. But yeah, he's making his quote-unquote official debut with Mercedes next week. I don't think he said which car he's taking, but I'd imagine he'll be taking Hamilton's seat, sort of in FP1 next week. I mean, it would make sense, but yeah, it's I'm not sure. I think sort of putting him into that seat so young, for me personally, I do think there's definitely an element of risk involved. Well, obviously there is, because whilst he's highly rated, one could argue he is still a bit of an unknown quantity in his youth. And Mercedes is a team that's sort of back on the ascendancy again. Granted, this weekend in Zandvoort they had what they could probably describe as a bit of an off weekend, obviously with Hamilton, having a bit of a bad qualifying, and then they ultimately finished sort of at the back of the front pack, finishing 7th and 8th. So it's it's a gamble for Mercedes if Mercedes does choose to pass any in that seat. But then the other question you've got to ask is who else would go in that seat, because Sainz has gone to Williams. Red Bull, Mercedes are trying to court Max from Red Bull, but I think they'll have to prize them from the cold dead hands of Helmut Marko for that to happen. Because the Verstappens and Helmut Marko are sort of they make no secret of how much they owe each other for everything that they've got in F1. So it'll be an interesting one if Antonelli does get that seat. But just one final thing that I'd like to talk about, Tom, is Mercedes. They went for an alternate strategy. They were looking for that sort of 5-star strategy, but unfortunately they didn't quite get it. But if you think this podcast deserves a 5-star rating on Spotify, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, nobody saw that come in, please take 5 to leave a 5-star rating on your respective platform. Also, if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I definitely didn't forget that, and I've only just remembered. So, Tom, the Mercedes strategy today, they appeared to lack a bit of outright pace. Russell made a good start. He got the better of Piastri going into turn one, did a nice move sort of through the inside as Piastri sort of seemed to get a worse start. He was holding on to P3 for a while, but ultimately didn't quite get anywhere. Both the Mercs ended up two-stopping. I'm very certain they both two-stopped onto a set of softs at the end. Hamilton started on a set of softs, and despite what Sky Sports was telling you, it wasn't sort of as quick as we thought it was. I mean, they did both end up in the points, which is good in itself. But for a team that has won the last 3 out of 4 races, please correct me if I'm not wrong. I believe it is. I think for them to finish 7th and 8th today, it'll be a bit of a sort of bump back down to reality, because I don't know about you, but to me, they definitely seem to sort of firmly be, like I said earlier, at the back of the Formula A pack. What do you think?
I think it was an interesting change. Like, they looked like they were all over it, and then the shock of Hamilton going out in Q2, and then the penalty dropping the back even further. But George was able to get up there, and was able to, obviously being on the even number side of the grid, was able to get into the top 3 early doors, and track position being so important that Zandvoort looked like he might be able to hold on to it. But then I don't know what happened. Like, Hamilton did a good stint on those softs, because it was obviously he got the launch off the line, which helped him gain 2 positions on lap 1. That was great. Because normally we see when Hamilton starts in the midfield, he starts on the hards and then just goes backwards and then complains about his strategy and then ends up scraping 10th place or something. So it was nice to see that he was having a more aggressive strategy. And the problem with that is that he then had to try and make those tyres work hard. Pirelli said that they would last 25 laps if you were out front and looking after them. He was going through the pack, overtaking people in dirty air, and he made them last 25 laps and still had competitive time. So no, it wasn't a blisteringly fast stint, but he did incredibly well with the tyres to make them last as he did. Others didn't. He was by far he wasn't the highest starting of the soft runners, but he was the highest finishing of the soft runners. So I think he did a great job in that first stint. Going on to the hard tyres in the middle part of the race. Now, I thought that he made the swap back to softs because he had the gap back to Gasly, I think it was. That it was a comfortable pit stop, and why not? You can then push forward and try to do something different, because if you're just lapping the same pace as the guy in front and you've got a gap for a pit stop, why not make the pit stop? Might make it work. So I can see why they made that change. But then the big surprise was when Russell gave up 2 positions to make that change, to then look like he was going to try and chase down Perez and Piastri and Leclerc, and the pace was nowhere. In fact, the pace was so bad that Hamilton ended up just behind him. He was with 10 laps to go. He was 1.6 seconds behind him with tyres that were like 10 laps older. Soft tyres that were 10 laps older. That's a really odd situation. And Toto Wolff after the race was saying that they switched to a two-stop because the degradation was so bad. But I don't think the degradation was that bad. I think maybe in the case of George. Now I know George went for a much lower downforce setup, so I'm guessing that he was sliding a lot more and was finding it harder to get the tires into the temperature window. And Hamilton having the more downforce meant he was able to keep the temperature, was able to just didn't have to push them quite so hard through those corners. So I think that's probably what it comes down to, the two setups. So George got the setup wrong for the race, and it was better for Hamilton, which is why he ended up finishing just behind his teammate from such a low starting position. But it is disappointing for Mercedes that they were in a chance of a podium, and in the end they were nowhere. They were the fourth fastest car today in the end, once it all shook out. And given where Ferrari were, I know we've not spoken about Ferrari that much today, but they did a brilliant job. Hats off to their strategy and to their drivers as well, because both drivers had very strong races.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. We haven't really talked about Ferrari much. I'll be honest. I didn't really put them in the notes because they were sort of there, but they weren't. They weren't sort of really sort of battling for anything. Leclerc held on to a decent P3. Sainz worked his way up all right from P10, but I think that's probably the most Ferrari was ever really going to get. It does feel like sometimes that perhaps the Ferrari and McLaren strategy have sort of swapped teams, bearing in mind that McLaren at one point were asking Lando what he wanted to do or who he wanted to fight with, which, let's be real, that should be something that the team and the race engineer should be telling the driver, not the other way around. But there we are. So there's just those are just sort of things which McLaren needs to iron out, and it's something that I think will come in time. But yeah, well, we will see. So finally, Tom, just to round out, let's have a quick chat through driver of the day. So the official Grid Talk driver of the day was Lando Norris. I mean, I'm sure we can all understand why. Who was your driver of the day?
Well, we all know Lando Norris is my favourite driver pretty much of all time in Formula One, so it's going to be difficult for me not to say it. But I'm not going to say Lando Norris because it's very obvious. And by my own criteria, when it comes to driver of the day, if you make a mistake during the race, unless everyone else makes more mistakes, you can't be driver of the day. And he did lose a position at the start, so I don't think I can give it to him. Now, Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, had a brilliant start, a good strategy, and he made those tyres last under incredible pressure from Oscar Piastri for a very, very long period of time. There was a time you think, oh, Piastri's on for second place here. And all he needs to do is he breezed past George Russell like he wasn't even there. And then he was flying up to the back of Charles Leclerc and then got 1.5 seconds behind him, and boom, end of race for Oscar Piastri. And that's down to incredible time management and racecraft from Leclerc to get there and stay there. So I'm going to go an unsuspecting podium from Charles Leclerc for him as my driver of the day.
Fair enough. I was considering giving it to Hamilton, bearing in mind he started outside the top 10. And then, yeah, but then when you look at how far back he finished, I thought, bear in mind he's in the Mercedes, you would expect him to finish in the points. So I opted against it. I'm actually going to agree with you. I'm also going to say Charles Leclerc, because we never really talked about Ferrari being in contention for the win or for getting a really good result. He was almost a second off in quali, but it was it still wasn't. You've really distracted me with that message in Zoom. Sorry.
I'm very sorry.
For anybody listening or watching, so Tom Harris has just put in the Zoom chat, said apparently I've been replaced by the lizards. I don't know, maybe I've been chatting to Danica Patrick. But
well,
yeah.
You were praising Hamilton. You can't be. You must be a lizard.
Oh, how dare I praise Sir Lewis Hamilton? Yeah, no, we all know I'm a Mac fan. No, I'm going to give my driver of the day to Leclerc as well, finishing P3 in that Ferrari, which wasn't really in contention for anything more than a sort of decent haul of points. I think is a damn good result for them. So with that all being said, Tom, just tell us a bit more about yourself. You're also part of the Monkey Seat podcast, so tell us a bit more about Grid Talk's dirty cousin.
Exactly that. Grid Talk's Dirty Cousin, the Monkey Seat. We occasionally record podcasts. We haven't done the review of the Belgian Grand Prix yet. We're probably not going to do it now because we just kind of got a bit waylaid with other things going on. So, yeah, we will get on it for the Zandvoort Grand Prix review, and I think we're going to try and find a way to get you on that one, Tom, aren't we? Because we need to discuss a certain bet that we had back just before Miami, ironically. So we need to discuss cashing in on that. So yeah, we're just basically the as Tom said, the Dirty Cousins. There's no censoring, there's no monetization, there's nothing like that. We're just there having fun. So if you want to come and just have a laugh and yeah, just laugh about F1 and generally laughing when things go wrong to George Russell from my co-host anyway. So yeah, come and give us a listen. We're just Monkey Seat Podcast on all the socials at Monkey Seat Pod. Just search for Monkey Seat in the podcast players and you'll find us.
Brilliant, thanks, Tom. And as for me, what I'm going to give a shout out, I'm going to give a shout out to our junior show, Formula Talk. It's on a bit of a hiatus at the moment, but it covers everything F1 Academy, F2, and F3. It also perhaps looks at sometimes things like the Indy 500 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but it does mainly focus on the junior series. So, with that all being said, Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live. We're also available on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon to help support the show. We really need to reword that. Also, make sure you are subscribed so you're the first to know when each new episode is released. We'll be back soon on Wednesday with plenty more F1 content, namely to preview the Italian Grand Prix. Thank you so much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.
Recording stopped.